The vastness of space stretched endlessly, stars blinking like distant memories. Within the heart of this cosmic abyss, a massive alien warship moved silently, its sleek, metallic frame absorbing the light around it. It was the Vorshak, a diplomatic vessel of the Zork Empire, sent on a mission to Earth. Inside, Ambassador Excital sat rigidly in his command chamber, his four crimson eyes staring coldly at the blue-green planet below. He did not want to be here. Earth, a primitive world teetering on the edge of self-destruction. War, greed, and chaos defined these creatures. The very idea of living among them was revolting. Excital clenched his clawed fingers, resisting the urge to snarl. He had spent years conquering worlds, subjugating lesser species in the name of the Empire. And now, he was being punished, banished to a backward planet to guide its inhabitants toward civilization. It was an insult. A holographic projection flickered to life before him. High Chancellor Vorzin, the ruthless leader of the Empire, glared down at him. Kijital, the Chancellor's voice was a low growl. You have been assigned as the ambassador to Earth. Your mission is simple: observe, advise, and ensure humanity's peaceful evolution under our watchful eye. Do not interfere directly. Zytel's mandibles twitched with irritation. Chancellor, this species is beyond saving. Their violent history, their primitive emotions, surely extermination would be more efficient. Vorzin narrowed his eyes. We are not in the business of genocide, Excital. We are in the business of control. He leaned forward. Earth may seem insignificant now, but given enough time, they could become a threat. If we guide their progress, they will remain dependent on us. If they resist, then we will eliminate them, but only when necessary. Excital exhaled sharply. He understood. The Empire did not care for humanity's well-being. They cared about power, manipulation, domination, and he would be their instrument. The hologram flickered out. A sharp mechanical voice interrupted his thoughts. Ambassador, we have entered Earth's orbit. Shall we initiate descent? Excital stood, his tall, armored frame casting a long shadow over the control deck. Proceed, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. The Vorshak descended rapidly through Earth's atmosphere, its cloaking technology rendering it invisible. Below, sprawling cities glowed with artificial light, rivers of traffic flowing endlessly. Excital sneered at the sight. So inefficient, so chaotic. The ship came to a halt above a secluded valley, hidden from human eyes. A small diplomatic outpost had been established here, a blend of alien architecture and human engineering. As Excital stepped off the ship, a delegation of human officials awaited him. The leader, a stiff-backed general with graying hair, stepped forward. His nameplate read General Mason. Ambassador Excital. Mason said, his expression unreadable. Welcome to Earth. Excital did not extend his hand. Human customs were beneath him. General Mason, he said coldly, I assume you understand the significance of my presence. Mason nodded. We understand that your empire has taken an interest in us. We don't fully trust your motives, but for now, diplomacy is preferable to war. Excital let out a short, humorless laugh. War? With us? Your kind wouldn't last a day. Mason's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He simply turned. We have prepared a facility where you can oversee your mission. We've also arranged for a team to assist you. Assist me. Excital repeated, his tone dripping with disdain. I require no assistance from humans. A new voice spoke up, young and sharp. Then maybe you shouldn't be here at all. Excital turned, locking eyes with a woman in military fatigues, her gaze fierce and unyielding. She stood with her arms crossed, unimpressed by his towering form. Mason sighed. This is Captain Elena Carter. She'll be your liaison. Excital studied her. Humans were fragile creatures, but this one, there was something different about her, something irritatingly defiant. I do not require a liaison, he said. Well, too bad, Elena shot back. Orders from your own empire say you have to work with us. Saital's claws twitched. How dare this human speak to him this way? But he held his tongue. This was merely a temporary inconvenience. As the group walked toward the facility, Saital activated his wrist device, scanning the area. The Empire's records claimed that humans were progressing steadily, but his data showed signs of strange energy signatures. He frowned. Something was not right. His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden explosion in the distance. Alarms blared. Soldiers scrambled. Saital's head snapped toward the source. Just beyond the valley, black smoke billowed into the sky. An attack. Mason cursed. Damn it. It's the Resistance. Saital turned sharply. Resistance. Elena was already running toward the comms unit. We've been tracking a rogue human faction. They believe your empire is controlling us. They think we're being manipulated. Saital's mind raced. What foolishness was this? The empire had no need to control a species so weak. Before he could respond, gunfire erupted. A squad of black-clad human soldiers emerged from the forest, their weapons blazing. The diplomatic guards returned fire, but the attack was sudden, chaotic. One of the rebels raised a launcher. A missile shot toward the facility. Saital acted without thinking. His reflexes were far superior to any humans. In a blur, he raised his hand, activating a cloaking field around the missile. The warhead vanished into thin air before impact, the explosion muffled within a pocket of distorted reality. The rebels hesitated. They had not expected the alien to react so swiftly. Saital lunged forward. With terrifying speed, he grabbed the nearest attacker, lifting him effortlessly. The human struggled, but Saital's grip was like iron. The rebel gasped, his eyes wide with desperation. You don't see it, do you? Saital's gaze darkened. See what? The rebel let out a breathless laugh. You think you're here to guide us, but you don't realize you're just another pawn in their game. A sudden beeping noise. Saital barely had time to react before the human detonated a hidden explosive on his chest. The blast sent Saital flying backward, his armored body slamming against the ground. His vision blurred. Smoke filled the air. Sirens screamed. Through the chaos, he saw Elena dragging Mason behind cover, firing back at the remaining attackers. Saital pushed himself up, his mind reeling. What had that human meant? Who was playing whom? And for the first time since his arrival, a sliver of doubt crept into his mind. The bridge of the Zorthak flagship was silent. Every officer, every crew member, stood frozen as the massive human supercarrier came to life. Admiral Solveth stared at the holographic display, his mind struggling to comprehend what he was seeing. This ship was not a lifeless relic. It was not an abandoned ghost ship. It was awake. On the screens, the boarding team's life signs vanished one by one. No sounds, no distress calls, no explanations. Just a series of fading signals until there was nothing left but static. Retrieve them. Now, Solveth ordered, his voice sharp, but even he knew it was too late. The boarding shuttles, still clamped to the ship's hull, suddenly detached, their engines flickering as they drifted lifelessly into space. The warriors inside were either dead or gone. Something had taken them. Then the ship moved. For over a century, no human warship had dared to face the Zorthak fleet. The war had ended, humanity had been crushed, and their fleets had been annihilated. And yet, here it was, a human vessel larger than any they had ever encountered, slowly rotating, its dark armor absorbing the distant starlight. Solveth clenched his fists. Scan the ship. I want every detail analyzed immediately. The command crew rushed into action, sending powerful sensor waves toward the mysterious warship. Data poured into the screens, each new line of information more shocking than the last. First, the hull composition. It was made of a material unknown to the Zorthak. a strange alloy that absorbed radar waves and emitted almost no detectable energy signature. This was stealth technology beyond anything humanity had ever displayed. Then came the power readings. The ship's core reactor was far too advanced for human engineering, putting out energy levels that rivaled some of the Zorthak's own dreadnoughts. This was not a relic of the past. It was something new. One of the scientists turned to Solveth, his voice barely above a whisper. "Admiral, this ship is more powerful than anything we've ever seen from humanity." Solveth's mandibles twitched. That was impossible. Humanity had lost the war. They had no resources, no fleets, no technology to build something like this. And yet, here it was. A sudden signal erupted from the supercarrier, interrupting all communications. The alien fleet's screens flickered, overridden by a single message. "We were Navy or Joanen." Zolveth's breath caught in his throat. It was a message, not just text. It was a warning. And then something even more shocking happened. The ship's hull shifted, and a hidden hangar slowly began to open. Inside, a massive structure was revealed, something buried within the ship's design that no scanner had detected before. The crew gasped. It was a weapon. A cannon unlike anything the Zorthak had ever encountered, its core pulsing with dark blue energy, a terrifying glow forming at its center. It was charging up. "Admiral, it's locking onto us," one of the officers shouted in alarm. Zolveth's mind raced. This ship wasn't supposed to exist. It was a myth, a ghost of the past, and yet here it was, fully armed, fully operational, and aiming directly at them. "Defensive positions," he roared. "All ships, raise shields, and prepare to fire." The Zorthak fleet moved into a tight formation, their weapons primed and shields at maximum. The Admiral did not intend to underestimate humanity again. A sudden energy pulse surged from the human warship, a powerful shockwave that disabled long-range sensors and communications. The alien fleet was temporarily blinded, unable to get a lock on their target. And then, the real nightmare began. From the supercarrier's darkened hull, dozens of small objects detached and began to move. At first, they seemed like debris, floating harmlessly in space. But then, they accelerated. They weren't debris. They were drones. Not simple mechanical drones, but something more. They moved with impossible precision, darting between asteroids, avoiding gunfire with inhuman reflexes. Their movements were almost organic, like predators circling their prey. Each one was heavily armored, faster than any known Zorthak fighter. And they were coming straight for the fleet. "Open fire," Solveth commanded. The Zorthak warships unleashed a storm of plasma fire, their cannons glowing as they filled the void with deadly energy. But the drones were too fast. They weaved through the attacks, avoiding destruction with perfect maneuverability. Then they struck. The first Zorthak destroyer was torn apart in seconds. The drones breached the ship's shields effortlessly, their weapons slicing through hull plating like paper. Explosions erupted across its surface before it finally detonated into a ball of fire. More drones swarmed the remaining warships, tearing through their defenses with terrifying efficiency. Zolveth watched in horror as ship after ship fell, their weapons useless against the impossible agility of the enemy. This wasn't warfare. This was a massacre. "This can't be," one of the officers whispered, shaking in fear. Humans were weak. They were supposed to be gone. Zolveth's mind raced through every strategy, every countermeasure, but none of it mattered. This was beyond anything they had prepared for. This ship, this weapon, was a message. Humanity had not been destroyed. They had been waiting. And now, they had returned. With no other choice, Solveth made the only decision that could save what was left of his fleet. "Retreat," he ordered through clenched teeth. Now, the remaining Zorthak ships activated their warp drives, disappearing into the void one by one. Zolveth, his pride shattered, watched as the mysterious human warship remained, motionless, like a guardian of the battlefield, watching them flee. As the last of the fleet jumped away, a final message came through. A voice, cold, mechanical, but filled with something ancient, something powerful. We were never gone. We were just waiting for you to notice. The screen went black. The ship disappeared into the darkness of the asteroid field once more. Dolveth sat in silence, his claws gripping the armrest of his chair. This war had never truly ended. Humanity was still here, and they were stronger than ever before. Exatel stood in silence, staring at the classified data glowing on his screen. His mind refused to accept what he had just uncovered, yet the truth was undeniable. The Empire was not here to guide humanity. They were here to control them, to keep them weak, to ensure they never became a threat. Every mission briefing, every lesson drilled into him since his youth, it had all been a lie. Elena stood by the doorway, watching him carefully. She could tell something had shifted. The arrogance, the cold superiority that always radiated from him, it wasn't there anymore. He looked, shaken. "Well," she pressed, "what did you find?" Kaitel's claws twitched against the console. He could feel the weight of a decision pressing down on him. If he told her the truth, he would be committing treason against his own people. But if he kept silent, he would be complicit in the Empire's deception. For the first time in his life, he hesitated. He turned toward her. His voice, usually so firm and emotionless, wavered slightly. The rebels were right. Elena's breath hitched. She had suspected as much, but hearing it from him made it real. The Empire isn't just observing you, Kexaital continued. They're actively interfering with your development. That facility in the Arctic, it's suppressing human advancements. If it weren't for them, you would be far more advanced than you are now. Elena's fists clenched. They've been holding us back. Ital nodded. Yes. She exhaled sharply, pacing the room. It all made sense now. Every stalled breakthrough, every strange disappearance of top scientists, every conflict that seemed to keep humanity distracted from real progress. It wasn't just human nature. It was engineered. She turned back to him. And you? What are you going to do about it? Phytal didn't answer immediately. He had spent his entire life serving the Empire, believing in its mission. If he turned against them now, he would be branded a traitor, a fugitive. But could he continue serving them, knowing what he now knew? Before he could respond, an urgent beeping sound filled the room. An incoming transmission. Kexaital stiffened. He recognized the encrypted signal. It was from High Chancellor Vorzin. "Elena, leave," he ordered. She folded her arms. Not a chance. The transmission connected, and the holographic form of the High Chancellor flickered to life. His piercing yellow eyes locked onto Kexaital, his expression unreadable. "Ambassador," Vorzin's deep voice rumbled. "We have been monitoring the situation. You have been compromised." Kexaital's blood ran cold. The Chancellor's gaze shifted slightly, noticing Elena in the background. His mandibles twitched. "And I see the source of the contamination." Kexaital knew what was coming before the words were spoken. "You are to detain the human immediately," Vorzin commanded. "Execute her if necessary. We cannot allow this rebellion to spread further." Elena stiffened, reaching for her weapon. Kexaital moved faster. With a swift motion, he disabled the transmission. The hologram flickered and died. Elena's hand remained on her gun, but she didn't draw it. She simply watched him, waiting. Kexaital exhaled. His decision was made. "They will come for me now," he said. "For both of us." Elena smirked slightly. "Welcome to the club." They didn't have much time. The Empire would not tolerate disobedience. If Kexaital had any value left to them, they might try to recondition him. If not, he would be eliminated. He turned back to the console, fingers flying across the interface. "We need to move fast. I can access the security grid and erase our presence for a short time, but it won't last. They will notice." Elena's voice was firm. We need to get to Mason. If he doesn't already know about this, he needs to. Kaital nodded. And then? She grinned, but there was no humor in it. Then we take that damn facility down. For the first time, Kaital didn't disagree. They moved quickly through the corridors, avoiding security cameras where possible. The human base was still on high alert after the rebel attack, which worked in their favor. No one suspected that the real threat was already inside. When they reached Mason's office, Alina didn't bother knocking. She pushed the door open, and the general immediately stood, his hand moving to his sidearm. His eyes flicked between the two of them, instantly sensing the tension. "What's going on?" he demanded. Kaital stepped forward. "The Empire is not here to guide your people. They are here to control you. The Arctic facility is suppressing your advancement, ensuring you remain dependent on them." Mason's face remained unreadable, but his eyes darkened. "You're sure?" "I have the data to prove it." The general let out a slow breath, his jaw tightening. He had spent years working alongside the Zorkai, convincing himself that diplomacy was the right path, that humanity could benefit from their presence. Now he realized how blind he had been. "They're going to come for him," Alina said. "Probably for us too." Mason nodded. "Then we don't have much time." He moved to his desk, activating a secure communication channel. "We'll need a team. People we can trust." Kaital's claws tapped against the metal table. "This is not just an act of rebellion. If we move against the facility, it will be seen as an act of war." Mason met his gaze. "Then I hope you're ready to pick a side, Ambassador." Kaital didn't hesitate this time. "I already have." The next few hours were a blur of preparation. Weapons were secured, tactical plans were drawn, and encrypted transmissions were sent to trusted allies. Mason had connections, people in high places who had suspected something was wrong, but had never had proof. Now they had the evidence they needed. But even as they prepared for battle, Kaital couldn't shake the feeling that they were already too late. The Empire knew of his betrayal. They wouldn't just send soldiers. They would send eliminators, silent, deadly operatives trained to wipe out threats before they could grow. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley, Kaital felt the first tremors in the air. A low, almost imperceptible hum filled the facility. Alina's eyes narrowed. "What is that?" Kaital's stomach dropped. "They're already here." The hunt had begun. The hum in the air grew louder, vibrating through the walls of the base like an unseen force pressing down on everything. Kaital's four crimson eyes flickered with recognition. Stealth ships, the Empire's elite hunters, had arrived. Alina grabbed her rifle. Mason was already issuing orders into his comms, and Kaital knew that within minutes, this base would turn into a battlefield. "They'll target me first," Kaital said, his voice grim. "I'm the highest priority." "No offense, Ambassador," Mason growled, loading his sidearm, "but we're all targets now." The lights flickered. The security grid went offline. A second later, a deep mechanical voice echoed through the base's speakers. "Kaital of Zorkai, you are ordered to surrender. The Empire will be merciful if you comply." Kaital's claws flexed. "They do not send eliminators to be merciful." A loud explosion rocked the base. The attack had begun. The halls filled with rapid gunfire, shouting, and the sharp, inhuman screeches of Zorkai assassins. These were not mere soldiers. They were the Voidborn, the Empire's deadliest operatives. Genetically enhanced, invisible in darkness, and merciless in combat. Kaital had trained alongside them in his youth. He knew exactly how they fought. "They're going to pick us off one by one," he warned. "They thrive in the shadows. We need to disrupt them." Alina smirked, pulling a grenade from her belt. "Disrupt? Yeah, I can do that." She lobbed it down the hallway. A second later, a burst of blinding white light flooded the corridor, forcing the Voidborn out of their cloaked state. Mason and his soldiers opened fire, cutting them down before they could retreat. Sci-Fi didn't hesitate. He moved with a speed that no human could match, engaging the remaining assassins in brutal close combat. His claws met theirs, and for the first time in his life, he fought against his own kind. He had always believed in Zor-K's superiority, but now, as he tore through the assassins with newfound purpose, he realized something. Strength wasn't just about power, it was about choice. And in this moment, I chose humanity. More Voidborn flooded in, but Sci-Fi was faster, deadlier. He knew their training. He knew their weaknesses, and one by one, they fell. Mason, Alina, and the human soldiers fought alongside him. And despite their lack of Zor-K enhancements, they held their ground. They fought with something the Voidborn lacked: desperation, defiance, and an unbreakable will to survive. The assassins realized too late that their mission was failing. The humans weren't weak. They weren't prey. They were warriors. And Sci-Fi, he was no longer an ambassador. He was a traitor, a defector, a new warrior born in fire and blood. As the last of the Voidborn fell, silence settled over the base. The attack had been repelled, but it was only the beginning. Sci-Fi turned to Mason and Alina. "We need to move," he said. "They will not stop. The next wave will be bigger." Mason wiped the sweat from his brow. "Then we take the fight to them." Sci-Fi nodded. "We destroy the facility." Alina smirked. "Now you're thinking like a human." For the first time, Sci-Fi took pride in that. The cold wind howled across the Arctic wasteland, sending waves of ice and snow rolling through the darkened sky. In the distance, the hidden Zor-K facility loomed beneath the ice, an unnatural structure, sleek and pulsing with alien energy. It was the heart of humanity's suppression. Mason, Alina, and Sci-Fi crouched behind a ridge, surveying the enemy stronghold. This was it, the mission that would decide Earth's future. "They know we're coming," Mason muttered, adjusting his scope. Below them, Zor-Kai war machines patrolled the perimeter, massive, spider-like constructs armed with plasma cannons. Squads of armored sentries moved in perfect synchronization, their glowing red visors scanning the darkness. Sci-Fi's 4 crimson eyes narrowed. They will not expect a direct assault. The humans they have faced before were uncoordinated, divided. We are not. Alina smirked. "Dan right. The resistance forces, hundreds of soldiers, former rebels and defected military operatives, were positioned across the frozen landscape, waiting for the signal. This wasn't just a battle. It was a revolution." Mason gave a sharp nod. "We hit them fast and hard. Once we breach the facility, we plant the charges and bring the whole thing down." Sci-Fi's claws flexed. "Leave the main defenses to me. I know their patterns, their weaknesses. I can dismantle them faster than they can adapt." Alina checked her weapon. "And the Voidborn. There will be more of them." Sci-Fi met her gaze. "I will handle my own kind." Mason raised his fist. "Then let's give them hell." The order was given. A moment later, the battlefield erupted into chaos. Missiles streaked through the sky, slamming into the enemy turrets. Resistance fighters charged forward, engaging the Zor-K soldiers in a brutal firefight. The ice cracked beneath the force of explosions. Sci-Fi moved like a phantom through the battlefield, faster than any human, stronger than any soldier. He tore through enemy ranks, his claws ripping through armor, his movements precise and relentless. For the first time, he was not fighting for the Empire. He was fighting for something greater. Alina and Mason pushed forward, cutting through the enemy lines with calculated precision. The war machines fired plasma bolts, scorching the ice, but the rebels had studied their attack patterns. They outmaneuvered them, disabling their targeting systems and bringing the mechanical giants crashing down. The Voidborn emerged from the shadows, silent, ruthless, nearly invisible. But Sci-Fi had been forged in their training. He met them head-on. Blades clashed. Claws tore. The battlefield became a dance of light and death. Kaital fought without hesitation, taking down his former brethren one by one. They had no loyalty to anything except orders. But he had something stronger. He had a purpose. The team breached the facility doors, pushing deeper inside as alarms blared. The walls pulsed with alien energy. The entire structure was powered by a core, a device that suppressed human technological advancement. Mason and Alina planted charges along the main pillars, setting the explosives with precision. Once detonated, the entire facility would collapse. Kaital moved toward the control room, accessing the database. His claws typed rapidly, pulling up files, schematics, anything that could be used against the Empire. And then he found it. A transmission. If the suppression facility falls, activate Omega Protocol. Deploy planetary cleansing. Kaital's breath caught. His claws froze over the console. What is it? Alina asked, noticing his hesitation. His voice was low, almost hollow. If we destroy this place, the Empire will not retreat. They will erase this world. Mason clenched his fists. Damn it. There's always a failsafe. Alina turned to Kaital. Can you stop it? His mind raced. No, but I can delay it. A moment of silence passed between them. This was their choice. Destroy the facility and risk the entire planet, or let it stand and remain enslaved. Mason exhaled. Then we have to take that risk. Alina nodded. Better to die free than live in chains. Kaital looked at them. Two humans, fragile yet unbreakable. He had once seen them as inferior. Now he saw them as warriors, as equals. His claws tightened. Then let's finish this. The final charge was set. The countdown began. They ran. As they emerged from the facility, the ground trembled beneath them. The ice cracked, flames erupted, and the structure collapsed in on itself. The suppression field was gone. And across the planet, humanity's potential was unleashed. The Empire would come. The war was far from over. But for the first time in history, Earth had a fighting chance. And Kaital, once an enemy, was now its protector. The sky above Earth was no longer silent. The stars burned with war. Massive Zorkai warships loomed in orbit, their weapons primed to erase humanity from existence. The destruction of the Arctic facility had triggered Omega Protocol, a full-scale planetary cleansing. The Empire did not tolerate defiance. But Earth was no longer defenseless. In the days since the facility's destruction, something had changed. Human technology had begun evolving at an impossible speed. Engineers and scientists worked around the clock, developing weapons and defenses they had never dreamed of. Their progress had been shackled for centuries, but now they were free. The rebellion had grown into an army. Nations that once distrusted each other stood united. Old enemies became allies, for they all faced a common threat. And at the heart of it all was Kaital. He stood aboard a human command vessel, looking out at the chaos unfolding in space. Earth's forces, once primitive in comparison, now held their ground against the Zorkai fleet. It wasn't just brute force keeping them alive. It was strategy, adaptability, and sheer human resilience. Behind him, Mason and Alina studied the battle maps, coordinating strikes against the enemy. They were outnumbered, but not outmatched. The Zorkai still see you as primitive. Kaital said, his voice calm but firm. That is their mistake. Mason smirked. Let's make sure they regret it. The battle began. Earth's first true space fleet launched into the skies. Hybrid ships, human ingenuity fused with stolen Zorkai technology, pierced through the enemy lines. Plasma and railgun fire lit up the darkness. What should have been a massacre turned into a war. I knew. Tal led the truth. The Zorkai still considered him a traitor, but he no longer cared. He had chosen his side. And today, he would fight not as an ambassador, not as a soldier of the Empire, but as a warrior of Earth. The battle was brutal. Zor-K drop pods rained down onto the planet, unleashing ground forces in an attempt to crush human resistance. But the people of Earth did not run. They fought. Mason's forces held the front lines, pushing the enemy back street by street. Cities burned, but they did not fall. Elena led strike teams, sabotaging Zor-K outposts and crippling their command structure. And Xital, he hunted his own kind. The Voidborn came for him, relentless as ever. But this time, they did not face an ambassador. They faced something far worse. He moved like a shadow, striking faster than their enhanced eyes could follow. He knew their training, their tactics, and he used it against them. One by one, they fell. The war raged for hours, days. Neither side would retreat. Victory teetered on the edge of a knife. And then, humanity proved why they could not be conquered. A single, desperate strike team, led by Mason and Elena, breached the Zor-K flagship. They fought their way through its corridors, planting explosives along its energy core. As the countdown reached its final seconds, Mason gave the order. "Get out now." The explosion rippled through space. The Zor-K command ship, the heart of their fleet, was gone. The remaining warships, leaderless and disoriented, faltered, and for the first time in history, an empire that had crushed hundreds of worlds was forced to retreat. Earth had won. The battle was over, but the war was far from finished. The Zor-K Empire would not forget this day. They would return. But when they did, they would no longer face a weak, divided species. They would face a rising power. Elena approached, wiping sweat and blood from her brow. "You think they'll be back?" Xital didn't hesitate. "Yes, and next time, they will not underestimate you." Mason joined them, his uniform tattered, but his eyes bright with victory. "Then we'll be ready." Xital studied them. He had once seen them as lesser beings, fragile and weak. Now he knew the truth. Humanity was not weak. They were unstoppable. And so was he. He had defected from the Empire, abandoned everything he once knew. But here, standing among warriors who had fought against impossible odds, he had found something greater than duty. He had found purpose. He looked up at the sky, where human ships now soared freely. A new dawn had begun, and Earth's greatest war had only just begun.